Headline: Vermont schools can vaccinate children against parents' wishes. According to court records, the plaintiff's 6-year-old son was accidentally given 1 dose of the Pfizer COVID shot at a state-sponsored clinic at the child's school. The parents attempted to sue various state and school officials. The courts concluded that the defendants were immune due to the Federal PrEP Act. This act made it such that everyone involved with the COVID vaccine, manufacturers, distributors, the people who gave the shot, are immune. In other words, they can't be sued if you are injured by the shot. There are other relevant laws that American parents should be aware of. But first, let's look back at 2021 at these pop-up pediatric COVID vaccine clinics where this child and many others were jabbed. These events were not for children's health. These events were Baal worship. Baal is ritual child sacrifice. The very first clinic was a carnival in the Bronx, and we had a protest, and there was actually a robotic ball statue there. I feel so bad for that family in Vermont. Think about those pop-up COVID vaccine clinics for kids for a minute. Groups of adults came into public places in order to inject mystery ingredients into children. It was an unspeakable crime. It's understandable that those parents in Vermont want to sue school officials. I ask you to pause the video for a moment and read this post. COVID was successful because everyday Americans allowed it to happen. People make mistakes. People did not know. That's acceptable, but there has not been a reckoning, and because of that, this crime is prone to happening again. The following was filmed in May of 2021, and I discuss what can legally be done to children while they are at school. This video is for everyone who believes in parental rights and does not want their young child to receive the experimental mRNA injection. First, a brief introduction. My name is Elizabeth Glass, and you can find me on Instagram at Glass for Sovereignty and at facebook.com/Glass for Sovereignty. In June of 2019, the 2 youngest of my 4 children were kicked out of school due to what was called the repeal of the religious exemption. In total, over 27,000 New York State children were kicked out of school. The religious exemption had been the only way for New York parents to opt out of shots in order for their kids to attend school. Unlike in previous generations, kids today get 72 doses of 16 shots in order to attend school. There are screenshots throughout the video for documentation. Pause to read. Now, whether you are pro-shot or anti-shot, the deal is this: if it's forced, we are not free. So it was my state senator that was sponsoring that bill that became a law. So we looked for someone to challenge him because he was a real problem. We couldn't find anyone to challenge him. And then I found out that New York State children were receiving deadly HPV shots and Hep B shots at school without parental knowledge or consent. And so I decided to challenge him myself. So the reason I'm making this video is this: if you do not want your child to receive this experimental new shot, you can no longer send them to public school and most private schools. Oh, and this is not just for New Yorkers. This is for all American parents. Per the CDC, children have a 0% chance of dying from this virus. So how, you might ask, is the government able to do this? Due to the alleged coronavirus pandemic, in March of 2020, President Trump declared a national state of quote-unquote an emergency and signed Executive Order 12148 that transferred emergency functions and power over the federal government to FEMA, and transferred power from the president to FEMA Director Pete Gaynor. All 50 states also declared a state of emergency, including New York. The bills S-7919 and later S-5357 allowed for, quote, the suspension of and modification of laws relating to the disaster emergency. The suspension of laws. That means the government can do anything in order to deal with this public health quote-unquote emergency. There is also the legal doctrine of parens patriae. Under this legal doctrine, the government has the power and obligation to intervene on behalf of the best interest of a child in the event that they feel his or her welfare is in jeopardy. This means that the power over medical decision-making by the state kicks in, and you actually give legal authority over your child to the state from the time you drop them off at school until the time you pick them up in the afternoon. At a May 3rd, 2021 news conference, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said, quote, "Young people have to get vaccinated," unquote. He went on to say, quote, "I've asked high schools to organize events where they drive their students to mass vaccination sites. Put them on a bus and bring them to a mass vaccination site because that is the population that we need to vaccinate." A Department of Health official in New York State also said, quote, "We are working with the schools to go in there and vaccinate the students." It is an indisputable fact that an unknown number of New York children received the HPV shot and Hep B shot without parental consent in New York public schools. Section 23.4 of the New York State Health Regulations 10 NYCRR allow children to quote-unquote self-consent to certain injections. These regulations prohibit the release of medical or billing records by a healthcare provider to a parent or guardian, unquote. The medical staff are actually authorized by this regulation to conspire to withhold pertinent medical information from the parents. On the federal level, so this would apply to all 74 million American children, please consider the U.S. Department of Education's Model Notifications of Rights under the Protection of Pupil Rights. These are not rights at all. They're taking away your rights, but they're framing it like they're giving you rights. The PPRA affords parents of elementary and secondary students certain rights, including the right to receive notice and an opportunity to opt out a student out of, quote, any non-emergency invasive physical exam or screening as required as a condition of attendance administered by the school or its agent, unquote. An invasive physical exam is defined as, quote, any medical examination that involves the exposure of private body parts or any act during such examination that includes incision, insertion, or injection into the body. In December of 2020, I wrote to my Congresswoman certified return receipt asking for an explanation of this very alarming federal bill and received no response. If you want to read this note to my congressperson, please pause the video. I should note that the links no longer work, but the information still is on ed.gov. Although this shot does not prevent the spread of the virus and asymptomatic transmission is a myth, New York Governor Cuomo told teens and young adults that if they do not get the shots, they could, quote, kill their grandmother. They're also putting pressure on adolescents and teens to get the shot in order to go to college, concerts, sporting events, and other youth-oriented activities. This is a full-on attack on all American children, all races, all socioeconomic classes, all geographical areas. I am prohibited from answering legal questions. I do not give legal advice. You must consult with a reputable attorney familiar with this area of law. This information is provided for your edification and informational purposes only. Many would want to get an attorney to deal with this kind of a situation. However, we are in a silent war with quiet weapons. The individuals, people with names and addresses who are responsible for all this, are the psychic equivalent of a snake. You cannot hire an attorney when you are dealing with a snake. If you are a parent protecting your child from a snake, there's only one thing that you can do. I'm Elizabeth Glass. Thank you. Since I stumbled across those laws in 2020 and made that video in 2021, ed.gov has hidden the PPRA laws. However, I found them. Here they are. You can also look in your notifications from your school district. That's actually how I found out about these laws in the first place. A parent sent me their notifications from their district. Yeah, that could be a lot of fun. Go to your next school board meeting and ask them for the definition of the non-emergency invasive physical examinations and see what they say. So in summary, as exemplified by this Vermont legal case, parents appear to have no rights whatsoever. Not only that, reread this definition to yourself and really think about it. An invasive physical examination means any medical examination that involves the exposure of private body parts, that means nudity, or any act during such examination that includes incision, insertion, or injection into the body. So I'll say the quiet part out loud. Any act literally means any act. So is it legal to insert a penis into a child at school? And is that the core message being signaled via this court case?